Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Oh. Okay. So thank you so much for having me today. Got to work out a little nerves. I've been draining my cup for about 3 weeks now. Those of you in the room who understand Yiddish know it means you worry your head. I've been draining my cup a little. So here we are. I was born and raised in Memphis. My parents were Jewish. Their parents were Jewish. Their parents were Jewish. And I dare say if I did a 22andMe, it would come back 100% Ashkenazi Jew. It was interesting because my husband, Jimmy, and I have been at all the sessions so far. And the first session we were sitting, and I think John asked the question, tell each other what your impressions of Jewish people. And of course, for us, we were to tell our impressions of Catholics. And I had said that, and it's true, that when I was growing up in Memphis, I had a lot of Christian but Protestant friends, and I went to church with them and Bible study and Young Life and all of that. It was very interesting to me, but that I didn't have any Catholic friends. And then all of a sudden when I got home, it occurred to me, which is very funny, that I actually was very well connected to a big Catholic family. My father went to a wonderful Ivy League law school and graduated, came back to his hometown in Memphis and could not find a job in the larger, prestigious Protestant law firms. So he and a fellow law school classmate started a law firm, and his classmate was Catholic. So what happened was his partner's brother was our dentist, his partner's nieces were our babysitters, and it was a very happy union there. So we asked, why am I qualified to talk today? As John said, I'm a self-taught lifelong learner and a person of great faith, so we have that in common. I have led a women's Torah study group for 22 years at the temple, and I helped Rabbi Shana Mackler lead the conversion conversations class for about 10 years, and that I learned a lot from her. She's a wonderful teacher. As he said, I'm in group of one, the Interfaith group, and I'm also in an Interfaith book study with a one-on-one partner, but I'll get back to that. Let me tell you a little bit about, and the other thing I want to remind you is that I usually know my audience. When I'm doing Torah study, I know my audience. I don't know my audience, so I don't know what you know and what you don't know. So if you know all this, you'll forgive me. I want to just sort of get to the start of the basics. All Jews are rabbinic Jews. Okay, we are not biblical Jews. Everything, and that is all of them. That is Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. Orthodox Jews are rabbinic Jews. We all are. Our tradition is grounded in the writings of the rabbis who came after the Torah was written. So they're different. So there are those different branches of Judaism. Reform Jews like to say that we observe the spirit as opposed to the letter of the law. So there are mitzvot, or commandments, that are ritual, and there are some that are, lots that are ethical. Reform Jews choose to not observe some of the ritual commandments. Many they do, but some they don't. And one more thing I want to tell you. For Judaism, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter what you believe, it matters what you do, okay? It doesn't matter what you believe, it matters what you do. So that gets us into trouble sometimes, because theoretically that means you don't necessarily have to believe in God. And that drives some people, my husband for example, crazy. He can't believe that, but it's really true. So that consequently, there might be Jews who consider themselves, they're secular, or they're culinary, or they're, they only want to do social action. The way I think about it is that they may not think they believe in God, but God believes in them, and so not to worry. God understands everything, including atheists, so that's fine. Okay, so I want to show you the Hebrew Bible. We call it Tanakh. Tanakh, and that's on your sheet, Tanakh, okay? That's an acronym for Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, Bereshit, which is Genesis, Shemot, Exodus, Vayikra, Leviticus, Bamidbar, Numbers, and Devarim, Deuteronomy. Okay, that's the T, the Torah part of Tanakh. The N is for Nevi'im. Those are the prophets. Those prophets are, so our prophets go from Joshua to Malachi. And then the K part is the Ketuvim. Ketuvim are the writings. And the writings are from Psalms to 2nd Chronicles. That's the Hebrew Bible. For Jews, they are in descending order of holiness. The Torah is the most holy. Traditionally, Jews would say that the Torah was written by God, so it's the most holy. That the prophets were revealed in the spirit of prophecy as a message from God in the prophet's own words, and that the writings were inspired by God but written by man. I have a few unscientific observations. One unscientific observation in doing interfaith study is that Christians study the prophets and the writings, and Jews not so much. Jews study the Torah. And that's because it is important to know and understand that Jewish laws and practices are solely from the Torah and the commentary on the Torah. Okay? Solely, that's it. It's in the Torah. So what is commentary? You all had Rabbi Rami here a couple of weeks ago, and he was very interesting. I'm not sure he spoke on the topic, but that's just me, that he gets to speak on anything he wants. He did pass around the Talmud, what looks like the Talmud. I don't know if you all can see the Talmud, but there's just all kinds of writings, and there's like a law from the Torah, and then all kinds of writings around it. They say that every page of the Talmud is 1,800 years old or more. So it's a lot of older, and the other thing is, they say that a page of the Talmud is like a dialogue, because what happens is some of the older guys write their comment, and some of the younger guys can disagree. So the younger guys have the advantage, right? But it's like a dialogue. So one will say, I think this, and then the younger one will go, well, he said that, but I don't think that's right, because a lot of the commentary is being written based on the time period in which it happens. And so they might be responding to different things happening in their world. I've heard it said that Judaism is a religion of laws, very legalese, legal-minded, and there's a part of me that wants to say, so what's wrong with that? You know what? We are. I'll own that. We really are. The Torah has 613 commandments in it. There are 365 negative commandments, and that's to like days of the year, and 613 commandments, 365 are negative for the days of the year, and 248 of them are positive, corresponding, they say, to the number of bones in the body. The idea is every day of the year you know what you're not supposed to do, right? And with your whole body you're supposed to do what you're supposed to do. And by the way, the Big Ten are not otherwise distinguished from the other 603, so the rabbis teach that one should be equally careful in fulfilling each commandment, for what might seem minor to us may be major to God. So the Torah is the most important because of the laws, which we call mitzvot, which are commandments. So maybe you've heard somebody say, oh, they did a mitzvah. Oh, they did a mitzvah. And they say, oh, that's a command, that's a good deed. And so, sometimes it is, but actually it's a commandment. It's a heavier, weightier thing than just a good deed. It's a commandment. So anyway, I'll own that part about it being a legal religion, because it really is. It's also, the Torah is called a tree of life to those who hold it fast, a tree of life, which means it is living. The Torah is a living document. It is continually being commented on. There is, besides the Talmud, after the Talmud, we had the Shulchan Aruch, which was the set table. And then we had a book written called the Tablecloth, because the one who wrote the tablecloth had more to say, so we made the tablecloth. And then we have Midrash, which are stories that fill in the blanks of what happens in the Torah. And for more recent times, we have what's called responsa. So if something comes up in the world in which we live, and we don't know exactly how to deal with it, someone can write the rabbis. For the Reform movement, of which I'm a part, there is a board of rabbis who are in charge of responsa. And they'll go and they'll research it and come up with a way to answer it. So anything that happens in the world, we can look to the Torah for an answer and look to commentary for the answer. Okay. So how do we read the Torah? Let's see. So I've done the Tanakh. I've told you that, and I've told you mitzvot. And I should tell you that the Talmud is the Mishnah plus the Gemara. The Mishnah is our laws on the Torah, and the Gemara is commentary on the laws, because we comment on comment on comment. And then I told you about responsa and midrash. So the next word is parsha. Parsha is like a portion. The Torah is divided up into 54 portions, and each portion has a name. And the name comes from literally the first word or first idea. In Genesis, it's actually Bereshit is the first portion, and Bereshit is when God began to create the world. So it's just really began. So 54 portions are read every year. But the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. So we have to finish reading, and you don't ever really finish. You finish and then you start on the same Shabbat. You don't ever finish reading the Torah, you start again, and it's called Simchat Torah. And Simchat Torah is actually coming up. So tonight is Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre, and so I'll be at services tomorrow all day. And then after Yom Kippur, we've already had Rosh Hashanah, comes Sukkot, that's the harvest festival, and after Sukkot is Simchat Torah. So we have to finish on Simchat Torah, and Simchat Torah has to be in the fall. So what we do is 7 times every 19 years, we add a month, a second Adar, and it's a leap year. It's like a leap year. And so when it's not a leap year, we have 4 double portions. Does that make sense? So it's like, it's 7 times every 19. It's so random, but the rabbis were busy. So they were, there's a lot. Okay, and so we read a portion. The same portion is read all over the world. In any synagogue you go in, if it's, if we're reading Bereshit here, they're reading Bereshit in Paris, and they're reading Bereshit in Nairobi, and it's always the same. You can always go into a synagogue, and you're always going to hear the same Torah portion read. They also read a Haftorah portion. The Haftorah portion, Haftorah means not half a Torah, but Haftorah means additional. And what happened was, and usually it is from the Nevi'im, from the prophets. Sometimes it's from the Ketuvim, from writings, but that's usually on festivals. So, and they'll read that. Well, what happened was, way back when, like a long, long time ago, it was against the law to read the Torah. We were living somewhere where you couldn't read the Torah, you get in big trouble. So the rabbis got worried that maybe they would forget, and so what they did is they read from the Haftorah, because they're connected thematically. A Torah portion and a Haftorah portion they'll be linked thematically somehow. So the rabbis thought, well, that would be a good way just to sort of remind them of what it says in the Torah. So they read, a lot can happen in one Torah portion, right? For example, and I keep using the example of Bereshit, the first chapters of Genesis. In one portion, we have creation, we have Adam and Eve, we have the Garden of Eden, we have Cain and Abel. And it's a lot to try to do in one Shabbat. So when I started my women's Torah study, I didn't want to do it that way because I wanted to be able to look at every single word, every single phrase, because they say, the rabbis tell us that every word, every phrase is on purpose. There are no mistakes in the Torah. And the other thing is time is not linear in the Torah. That presents other problems, but that's okay. Okay. So that's how my group studies it. It took us 13 years to get through it the first time, right? And so, I mean, we just, okay. So, any questions? Yes?
Talk about the rabbis. The other rabbi talks about where are the rabbis today? Where do they exist? Are they like have an office?
Okay. Well, so a lot of the rabbis we're talking about lived way back when. Let's see. So there is like Rashi. He's a big one in the Talmud. He lived in northern France in the 11th century. Interestingly enough, Rashi only had daughters. So his son-in-laws and grandsons became commentators. Those are called the Tosafists. And a lot of the commentary that contradicts Rashi, of course, is from his son-in-laws and his grandsons. Okay? There is someone who lived in Tunisia in the 11th century. Their rabbis Hillel and Shammai lived before the Common Era. So we've had hundreds, if not thousands and thousands, maybe they say millions, of rabbis who lived all over the world who commented on the Torah. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes, Towns.
You mentioned something about a board of rabbis.
Well, that's...
Somebody wants a response.
Now, yes, there are rabbis now. And they probably are maybe like for the Reform movement, let's say they're all over the country and they meet together and they periodically, and if questions come in, they can answer them. I mean, if we think about how our world is changing, for example, if there's questions about the LGBTQ community, right? It's interesting in the Talmud, there are 5 different genders in the Talmud. So it has been the Talmud, they've talked about it. They've recognized the idea that sometimes that gender might be fluid or whatever it is, it's there. So the questions come in and they might go to the Talmud and look to see what it says and come up with an answer that we can use for our modern life. Thank you for asking. Yes, hang on.
The language of the Torah, is it ancient Hebrew or is that ancient Greek and modern Greek?
Well, so thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it. So the Torah is Hebrew. And I want to say what I found in studying is that every translation is an interpretation. So we are often not reading the same thing. And when we read our text and we study in just a few minutes, we're going to see that. Sometimes you think, well, I'm reading a translation of Hebrew, but what you might be reading is the translation from Greek to Hebrew. Ours is Aramaic to Hebrew. We read from what's called the Masoretic. We have the Masoretic text. And the Masoretes were a group of people who translated the Torah, I don't know. But, you know, there's the Septuagint, which would be the Greek translation of the Torah, and the Vulgate, which is the Latin translation of the Torah. So every single translation is an interpretation.
So the original language is Aramaic?
Well, it was written in, I guess spoken in Aramaic, but the original language was Hebrew. It was translated. Yes. Yes. Shabbat is Sabbath. Yes, Shabbat is the Sabbath. Anybody else? Yes.
Do you all refer to it in the same way as Christians do by like chapter and verse, or do you have a different way of referring to it?
Well, so we refer to it chapter and verse, but we are not but understanding that chapter and verse is not how we don't quote chapter and verse. Does that make sense? In other words, we're about the interpretation.
But if I'm like writing about it,
Yeah,
let's say I'm
yes.
writing about it, do I say like Genesis
Yes.
1:15?
Yes, exactly the same. Yes. Anybody else?
When
Yes.
you were studying it over the 13 years, what translation did you use, or did you study it in Hebrew?
No, we did not study it. I am not a Hebrew person. We studied, and I'm going to tell you about it in a minute, but this is Gunther Plaut. Plaut is it's actually, the reason we use Plaut is because these are the study Bibles we have at the temple. And Gunther Plaut was a Reform rabbi, and so that's what we use. The conservative study Bible is called Etz Hayim, which means tree of life. I also use that in doing, and we'll do a little study and I'll read from that. Anybody else? Okay. So I'm happy to be studying with you all today. You know, it is a very Jewish thing to have what's called a Ruta. And you see on your thing a Ruta. A Ruta comes from the word hever, which means friend. And I have my Ruta sitting right there. That is my friend Ellen, and she is a Protestant, and we study books together. And so here we are. Let me just say this, one more thing before we get going into the Torah. There is, I told you about the Talmud, one of the first chapters of the Talmud is called Pirkei Avot, and that is the wisdom of the fathers. And here's what it says. Get yourself a teacher, acquire a friend, and judge everyone charitably. So what does that mean? The rabbis tell us what it means is when you get yourself a teacher, you make a friend of someone, and that you can teach each other. You and your friend can teach each other. And the other thing that Pirkei Avot says is, who is wise? One who can learn from everyone. So I'm happy to be here and learn from you. All right. So let's see. We are going to, if you get your paper, we are going to look at, hold on, let's see. Hey.
May I just say one more thing before we get into this?
Yes.
That I learned from you, which is that the law, because that gets brought up between Christians and Jews and, opinions, attitudes, whatever. The law is a gift.
Right.
And so to see it as this legalistic, I've got to, jump through all these hoops, is not the way that I think, and not to put words in your mouth, it's not the way you see it.
Correct.
And that Leviticus is the center of the Torah. Are you going to say that?
Yeah.
Never mind. Okay.
She's taken my material. I may have to fire my Ruta. Okay. All right, so here we go. So on the bottom of our page. One of the things I did want to say is Rabbi Rami did teach us our prayer that we're supposed to say in the morning, Elohai neshama shenatata bi tahorati, right? I don't remember him saying that Jews are supposed to say 100 prayers a day. We're supposed to find gratitude in everything. It's not just thank you for my pure soul, but thank you for that my eyes opened. Thank you that the pipes that were supposed to opened, and the pipes that were supposed to closed. Thank you for the beauty of the day. We're supposed to say 100 blessings a day. Here's the blessing for the reading of the Torah. And I had an interesting conversation before I started about the fact that if anybody's been to a bar bat mitzvah, what they've heard is the blessing for the reading of Torah, which is just a little different. This is for the study, and we always say it. You can say it with me if you like. We say together, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav vitzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed is the eternal God, ruler of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot and commands us to engage in the study of Torah. Amen. All right. So let me put in front of me what you have in front of you. I have a lot of stuff here. There we go. Okay. So I wanted to set the stage for what we're going to be doing. We are in Kiddushim. And remember, I told you Kiddushim, that's the first word of the portion, Kiddushim, you shall be holy. We are in the middle of the Torah. The middle of the Torah is Vayikra, Leviticus, right? And the middle of Vayikra is the holiness code, and that's where we are, Kiddushim. Let me just tell you that Leviticus is where every yeshiva person, yeshiva boy, will begin study. It's the most important book in the Torah, which is a surprise, but it contains so many of the ethical laws that are important, that are crucial in Judaism. So Leviticus is the most important book. Doesn't have the great stories, but it's got so much to it that actually some people think it's kind of, because it's a lot of laws. And there's a lot about sacrifices, which, by the way, we don't do anymore and haven't done since the destruction of the Second Temple, when there was the diaspora. And we do get questions at Temple. Occasionally people will call and say, where do you sacrifice? It's like, well, we don't, prayer for Jews, prayer replaced sacrifice. So, anyway, okay. So I wanted to start just because I think this is a wonderful, at 19:1, you shall be holy. So at 19:1, the Eternal One spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the whole Israelite community and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Eternal your God, am holy. So this is from Etz Hayim. I told you this is the conservative study Torah. So this parsha, I told you this portion, is one of the richest and most exalted in the Torah, begins with the words, you shall be holy. What is holiness? The term can be applied to God, to good people, to a book, to a period of time, or to an animal offered as a sacrifice. To be holy is to be different, to be set apart from the ordinary. The ordinary is often used as the opposite of holy in rabbinic discourse. To be holy is to rise to partake in some measure of the special qualities of God, the source of holiness. Holiness is the highest level of human behavior, human beings at their most godlike. Hirsch describes holiness as occurring, quote, when a morally free human being has complete dominion over one's energies and inclinations and the temptations associated with them and places them at the service of God's will. For Martin Buber, holiness is found not in rising above the level of one's neighbor, but in relationships, in human beings recognizing the latent divinity of other people, even as God recognizes the latent divinity in each of us. God can make things holy, as in the case of the Sabbath. As human beings, we can be godlike by exercising our power to sanctify moments and objects in our life. Time can be sanctified when it is used to draw closer to God. Objects can become holy when they help people rise toward God. The Torah is holy not only because it comes from God, but because it leads to God. So that sort of brings me to a couple of things. The first thing that's sanctified in the Torah, of course, is time, right? It was evening and it was morning. So we sanctify time. It's important. And the other thing about objects is our blessing them makes them holy. We have like Kiddush cups where that we use on Shabbat, or our Sabbath candles. They are not inherently holy. They could be any candles. Our blessing them makes them holy. The laws of holiness can cut across all categories of life. They deal with ritual, with business ethics, with proper behavior towards the poor and the afflicted, and with family relations. The Talmud enumerates the most important principle of achieve holiness within the realm of the permitted. Go beyond obeying the letter of the law and refraining from what is forbidden by finding ways of sanctifying every moment of your life. The Ramban, that is Nachmanides, warns against the person who manages to lead an unworthy life without technically breaking any of the Torah's rules. Such a person is called a scoundrel within the bounds of Torah. And we know some scoundrels within the boundaries of Torah. So that is what we're going to be reading from. All right. So I chose this portion at 1917 because, hold on, let me see, let me find what I need. Okay. Because I was here that first session, and someone raised their hand and expressed the concern they didn't understand how Jews could pray to such an, I don't know if angry and vengeful, but you all have heard that. I mean, it's not something that we haven't heard, that the God of the Jews, the God of the Torah is angry and vengeful, and I just, Jews don't understand. We don't get that. I mean, I think there's some things that we don't get about you, you don't get about us, and that's why I think interfaith dialogue is so important. So I Googled it, which of course is what we do, and I found on a website that I trust that's called Jewish Virtual Library. I Googled it, and it's Jewish-Christian relations. Is Christianity a more, quote, loving religion than Judaism? Christianity is often regarded as a religion of love and compassion, while Judaism is portrayed as harsh and inflexible. The most commonly cited proof for this contention is in the Gospels, Matthew 5:43 through 44, that says, "You have heard it said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. But Jesus said, love your enemy, bless them that curse you." And then it goes on to say there is another text, which is the eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Judaism has responded to the above allegations by explaining that in the first instance that Matthew is not quoting the Bible accurately. So lo and behold, I go to my Torah, and I find at 17 that it says, "You shall not hate your kinfolk in your heart, reprove your kin, but incur no guilt on their account. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against members of your people. Love your fellow Israelite as yourself. I am the Eternal." So, hello, what's missing? There's no hate. There's no hate here. There's no hate in the Torah. It's nowhere in the Torah. Okay? So then I thought, so I'm going to bring this and we're going to talk about it. Well, okay. So then I have a friend who actually converted to Judaism, but her husband is Catholic, and they raised their children Catholic, and she's in my Torah study, and when I read that to her, she had this look like, I don't think so. And I'm like, it is, I am telling you, it is right here. And she proceeded to send me pages from a Catholic study Bible where it says, it doesn't really say that. This is what it acknowledges the fact that that's not really what Leviticus says. So I found at first she said she apologized. I said, no. I have done to your scripture what you have done to I have done to you what you have done to me. It happens both ways, right? So that is another reason why interfaith text study is important. It really helps us understand. There are all kinds of reasons why things are written the way they are. Maybe it's to prove a point. Who knows? Whatever it is. Yes?
There's a new book that came out it was Joseph Seegers and Amy Jill Levine on how you all see passages, interpret the same passage we do differently.
Yes.
My question is what you were saying earlier about is that stereotype still occurring where people they continue to assume that you all don't know because we were taught differently, but technically the interfaith dialogue should tamp that down, or are we supporting?
Right. Well, I think I understand what you're saying. I said before that my unscientific observation is that Christians study the prophets and writings more than Jews, and as I understand it, it is because that Jesus is found in a lot of them. As Jews never understood, like, how do you see that? We don't get that. We don't see it the same way. But if I understand, and I have, and that, the other thing I want to say is, this is our story, and you have your story, right? We each have our stories, and I'm not going to judge your story if that's how you see it, if that's how you learn it. And by the same token, you don't judge my story. It's my story. A really good example is I have a friend who gets really upset when she hears people say that the Last Supper was a Passover Seder, because our rabbis will tell us why it was not, and I didn't bring all the reasons. I could. The point is that it's in your text, and until we understand that, until we know it's in your text, then I'm not going to argue with you, because it's in your text. It's your story, and that's your story. I think that speaks to why interfaith dialogue and interfaith text study is so important. It helps us see each other and understand each other, and we respect each other. Any questions?
I just appreciate you saying that, because one of my is that we should be comfortable to understand and know the differences in those passages, and it shouldn't hurt our feelings 2,000 years later.
Right.
It really shouldn't.
No. No, I love that. Exactly.
It leads to stereotyping. It leads to all these things. But I'm glad you finally there. We should be comfortable and celebrate it. That's why that book says you should. It was posted in the Vatican, like the Pope.
Okay. Which is a great thing.
Celebrate the differences.
Yes. I think Dr. Levine does a great job of doing that. She's somebody else. I don't know if you all have heard her speak, but she does a wonderful job. In fact, the first book that my Ruta and I studied is The Bible With and Without Jesus. And it's a really wonderful, interesting, and I'm not so much a historian at all, but I do know that when I'm studying Torah with my ladies, that it is important to think about what was happening at the time and what they were writing about or against, or so anyway, yeah, so it's good. All right, anybody else have questions? Okay, so we are gonna do a little Torah study. Here we go. Let me find this. So, okay. So, at 17, it says, you shall not hate your kinfolk in your hearts. So, so one of the things that means is you don't let ill feelings fester, right? We don't want to let ill feelings fester. So this is Women's Torah Commentary, and it says that the corresponding to the word you shall not hate, the corresponding Hebrew term denotes both an emotion and a cognitive state of being. Our ancestors recognized it is difficult to separate one's emotions from one's attitudes and actions. That makes sense. And then it says, let's see, and then Plout says, you shall not, okay, the Torah, unlike ordinary legal codes, is concerned not only with actions, but with attitudes. It recognizes how destructive bottled up resentment can be and cautions us against wrong feelings as well as wrong acts. Okay. Let's see. It's very quiet in here. Does anybody have questions? Makes me it's never this quiet in Torah study towns.
If it cautions you against wrong attitudes as well as wrong acts, is that an exception to matters which you do?
Well, yeah. Ultimately, for Judaism now, ultimately, it's about what you do. Yeah, it is important that you have the right attitude, but the truth of the matter is, Maimonides had levels of giving, right? And the very bottom level is giving grudgingly, begrudgingly. The point is you give, that you do the act. Even if it's begrudging, it makes the chart, right? I mean, the top one is like you give anonymously, and you're happy to give, and it's all great. But the bottom is you give begrudgingly. So, right? Okay. Let's see. So, in other words, you should, admonish your neighbor for his or her wrongdoing so that you will not incur guilt on your neighbor's account. Okay. What do you think about that? Yes?
So say I find that I have a grudge.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Well, it's funny you ask. This is a good time of the year to talk about it. If you have a grudge, you the idea would be that you try to work with it, talk to the person that you have the grudge against, and try to work things out. Is that you don't want to keep things bottled up because they fester and they make things a whole lot worse. So yeah, you have to work on it. Okay. So Richard Elliott Friedman is a linguist, and he says it is so you shall not bear sin over him. You shall not bear sin over him. Where is it? Where is it? So if one fails to tell a person that he is doing wrong, then one bears some responsibility for things that this person goes on to do that might have been prevented. So you're responsible for doing that. That's your responsibility. Okay? Yes? Yes?
So you've referenced about 5 different commentaries now, Cloud, Richard Elliott Friedman, and
Yes.
Women's, and the Conservative. How many commentary books are there that you refer to when you are studying a parsha?
That's my husband, and that's a plant. Do you want to answer that? Do you want to answer that, Jimmy? A lot. I have a lot. And I'm always getting more. Are you bearing a grudge?
What qualifies a person to be a commentary?
Well, that is a great question, and actually, the way I look at it is that anybody can make comments. So we're all really students and rabbis, and we come up with things ourselves. What qualifies them to write a commentary? Most of the time, they're rabbis, and they've studied. Richard Elliott Friedman, I don't think is a rabbi. Well, no, I think he is, but he never practiced. He's a linguist. Gunther Plaut was a rabbi. They have different focuses, right? Amy Jill Levine is not a rabbi, but she is a New Testament scholar. She's a doctor. Yeah, Karen?
This is kind of you may not want to answer this question now because it really doesn't have anything to do with interpreting scripture. But sometime today, and if you want to do this afterwards, it's okay with me. Among all these levels or groups of Jews, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and there are more.
Reconstructionists. Yeah.
Right. How do y'all, like on a practical level, how do y'all navigate the differences? We have the Vatican and boom, that's that. How do y'all make peace among the different groups?
Well, that's a great question. I don't think that you have the Vatican and then boom. At least, okay, wait. Let me just say, so my friend Leslie, who I told you about, is the one who was shaking her head going, I don't think that's the way it was. Leslie was talking to me, and I don't know anything. I'm like a little knowledge is a dangerous thing because I don't know what I'm talking about. But she talked about the Dominicans as opposed to that different orders are different, known for different things. And I think that makes a difference, right? I think. And I think it's sort of the same. How do we make peace? the Orthodox, there are different kinds of Orthodox. There's modern Orthodox, there's Hasidic, there's, the Satmar, there's all kinds. So with a very brief history, until like the early 19th century, if you were Jewish, you were Orthodox. Now, you might have different rabbis, you did sort of different things. So in the early 19th century in Germany is when people started saying, you know what, we don't need to keep kosher, we don't need to wrap tefillin, we don't need to have a talit, we don't need to do all these things to be Jewish. We can practice the ethical commandments and we can let go of some of these ritual, and those are Reformed Jews, right? So then naturally what happens is, then there were some like, well, I think they've gone a little too far. Then came conservative. So that's sort of where between Orthodox and Reform are the conservative. And then within the conservative, there were some who said, well, I really think it's more, that God is more in nature and everything, and that were the Reconstructionists, right? So how do we make peace? Reformed Jews, I would like to say that, we're open to everybody. I don't know how to answer that. There's some Orthodox Jews who think that Reformed Jews are ruining Judaism, like we're watering it down or something. I don't think so. Theoretically, a Reformed Jew would be the most educated because they need to understand what it is they're choosing not to do, and you have to know that. I don't know. Yeah.
I like the question. I think to follow up, within Christian circles and even Catholic, the question of who's really right or who's really Catholic usually has the corollary of, and if you're wrong, you're going to hell. Like there's something at stake here.
Yes.
So I guess maybe we're looking for the at stakeness and the differences between Orthodoxy and Reformed Judaism, because when you're a Baptist and a Catholic, you're pointing fingers,
yes.
Usually, historically, maybe not so much anymore, and saying, well, your inability to understand that it's faith, not works, is going to make you go to hell, and you need to see it this way if you don't want to.
Right.
But my sense is probably Jews don't talk like that.
Well, excuse me, first of all, Jews, there is no hell in Judaism. We don't believe in hell. And I was really thinking about, and that sort of, I was thinking about that in terms of being legalistic. It's important for us that there's a mercy and justice on this earth, because we don't have hell. People don't go to hell, so that's important. I think, like I said, well, I don't know. The saddest thing to me is when Jews don't get along, because there are not that many of us. And when we are pointing fingers, it's painful, and it really is. So, yeah, Jimmy?
One of the things that binds the different aspects of groups of Jews is the Torah. Above all else, it's the base. And so, however you do your ritual, however you observe, going back to the Torah is the base.
He should be up here, I'm sorry. I don't know, I'm sorry. Yes.
But in Israel, they sort of delegated a lot of decisions about who's Jewish for purposes of marriage and stuff like that to some sort of rabbinic organization. And they're all Orthodox.
Yes.
And there are plenty of good members of the temple who wouldn't be approved to be married, it wouldn't be a Jewish marriage. And so the eyes of those Orthodox rabbis in Jerusalem. So there are some consequences.
Absolutely. It's Israel, it's first of all, it's complicated. Right? Rabbi Shana Mackler, who's a wonderful teacher, this is what she tells us, a Jew's relationship to Israel. Israel is like your mother, right? You don't have to live with her. You have to love her, right? And you have to answer when she calls. So what's happening in Israel is really, it's hard to watch. It really is. It's a very difficult thing to watch. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because it was just on, but why do you think from our camp or our church, certain stereotypes on these messages continue to persist when we have so much accessibility to knowledge? Now you have all these new outlets of the people that literally can search what's fact and fiction about Judaism, about practicing Jews. What do you think the Christian community could be doing better to ensure that certain stereotypical things that will come out, like that call about the sacrifice, or this new thing about labeling Ashkenazi Jews as Christians, which actual elected rep in Tennessee actually did? Yeah, it's strange.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, it was a weird one, but
I think doing this, right? I mean, I think, as we all go out into the world and we hear things that we know aren't true, that we say something. I mean, just in general, speak up and say things. Yeah.
The Torah passage that you just read about going to your neighbor and telling them when they did wrong so that they don't commit the same wrong again.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of how that will be done in practice within the Jewish community?
Oh, gosh. Let me think.
And I'll shed a little bit more light on where I'm going with this question. So,
Thank you.
In Christianity, we have the line, I believe Jesus said it, judge not, lest ye be judged. So there's a certain reluctance. There's a large portion of the Christian population that is very happy with judging no matter what Jesus said. And there's another portion of the Christian population that is like, no, I'm not touching judgment with a 10-foot pole. Like, I never say anybody does anything wrong because I don't want to. So there's those two extremes that we have. And the idea of me going to my brother and saying, listen, brother, you're doing X, Y, or Z, and that's leading you down the wrong path, for me would be difficult, right?
Right.
For my mom, probably would not be difficult at all. So the question is, how does that work in practice?
Well, I think we can all think of situations where, if anybody's done an intervention, right? You do that. You do. But I will say this, again, because we're rabbinic Jews, the rabbis put a lot of fences around that. And one of the things we learn from the Talmud is if you embarrass someone, it's like you killed them. So you have to be very, very careful, right? You don't necessarily do it in front of a group of people. There's ways to talk to someone when you want to help them or point out what it is you feel like they're doing that's dangerous, right? I don't know if that answers. Yeah.
In the synagogue that I was familiar with, during the Shabbat service, the Torah Scrolls are taken out of the ark and they're paraded around the congregation.
Right.
And everyone takes their prayer book, touches one of the scrolls, and then kisses. Is that a usual practice in all Reformed congregations? And what is its symbolism, its meaning?
Well, it's not, you can't generalize. In lots of congregations, when we do that, like on Saturday morning when we read the Torah, that, like I said, the Torah is a tree of life, and it was the gift that God gave the Jewish people. And our mission is to be a light unto the nations. And part of that has to do with living the values that are in the Torah. So it's our greatest possession. And it's just a symbol of respect and love. Okay, thank you. Anybody have a question? Yeah.
When your group is getting together and studying the Torah, how often do you guys have, you amongst your small group, or maybe it's larger, have differing interpretations? I mean, I'm sure that's a common occurrence, but would you say, like, if you have 7 people, you get 7 different interpretations?
No, that joke is 7 Jews, 12 opinions. I mean, everyone, right? The rabbis tell us there are 70 ways to interpret Torah, 70. So there's always, but before we end, if you don't mind, there is a prayer that I would like to say, and it's called the Shehekianu. And you're supposed to say it when you have a new and wonderful experience. And it's Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav. No, I just did it wrong. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehekianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman haseh. Praise be thou, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has given us life, who has sustained us, and who has brought us to this happy occasion. So thank you so much.